Good morning from Mission Control in Houston in the International Space Station Flight Control Room at NASA's Johnson Space Center as we are monitoring live the arrival of NASA's SpaceX 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission heading towards the International Space Station. At this hour, Flight Director Diana Trujillo, Capcom Alex Canalacos, and the Somos flight team are working closely with SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, California to monitor the cargo craft as it makes its way towards the orbiting laboratory. In about 5 minutes from now, the approach initiation burn for the Dragon spacecraft will be initiated, and that will begin the final approach for the vehicle, moving from 2.5 kilometers below the station to about 400 meters directly underneath it. Integrated operations between the two teams in Mission Control and in SpaceX have already gone underway. The teams have already pulled go for the approach initiation burn, and that sets up for these final few moments as the Dragon's spacecraft's arrival. Upon docking, currently targeted for approximately 5:38 a.m. Central Time, 6:38 a.m. Eastern Time, about 22 minutes earlier than originally planned, will complete a nearly 37-hour journey for the spacecraft that began on Friday evening at 6:05 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:05 p.m. Central, lifting off from Space Launch Complex 40 and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And again, we'll continue to monitor the approach initiation burn, now targeting 3 minutes and 52 seconds from now. The Dragon spacecraft has already completed a sequence of burns throughout the early morning hours and since its launch time to not only raise its altitude but catch up to the International Space Station. And we'll cover those in just a few more moments. On board the International Space Station, the Expedition 74 crew is awake and in their early morning activities. And on tap to monitor Dragon's arrival and docking will be NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway and ESA astronaut, European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adno. They will monitor from the cupola using special software and will follow Dragon all the way into its final destination, which will be the forward port of the International Space Station's Harmony module. And again, that docking time anticipated for 5:38 a.m. Central, 6:38 a.m. Eastern. And you can see the vehicles that are currently with the International Space Station, and there's that forward port in which the cargo Dragon will dock with Crew 12's Dragon at the zenith port of the Harmony module, joining Progress 94, Progress 95, Soyuz MS-28 that brought up NASA astronaut Chris Williams, Sergei Kudzverchkov, the International Space Station commander, and Sergei Mikheyev, and the Northrop Grumman Cygnus 24 cargo spacecraft. And aboard that Crew 12 Dragon that arrived at the space station back in February, that carried up Jack Hathaway on tap for monitoring duties this morning, along with Jessica Meir of NASA, Sophie Adno, and Andrei Fedyaev. And a view here of the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at NASA's Johnson Space Center, as we are now nearly 2 minutes away from the approach initiation burn. That'll be about a 90-second burn that, again, will pull the Dragon spacecraft from 2.5 kilometers below station up to 400 meters directly beneath it. Now, just before the broadcast started, the team's working on the ground for all checkouts for the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station, including the C2V2 communication system, or the common communications for visiting vehicles, to link up with the International Space Station. On board Dragon, nearly 6,500 pounds of food, fuel, and supplies for the Expedition 74 crew, and that'll spend about 1 month docked to the International Space Station. 4,700 pounds of total pressurized cargo with packaging, and little more than 1,700 pounds unpressurized, including crew supplies, science investigations, space equipment, vehicle hardware, and computer resources. And we'll take a closer look at some of the silent science highlights on board Dragon. We are now 50 seconds away from the approach initiation burn, and we'll stand by for monitoring. And now the Dragon cargo spacecraft 20 seconds away from the approach initiation burn to begin its final leg of the journey to the International Space Station. And we just received confirmation that the approach initiation burn is underway. And again, about a 90-second burn. We'll continue to monitor throughout. Now 42 seconds into the approach initiation burn, currently underway as the Draco thrusters firing on the Dragon spacecraft to again pull the spacecraft to about 400 meters directly beneath the International Space Station. Another 25 seconds remaining in the approach initiation burn. All teams here in Houston, as well as in SpaceX in Hawthorne, California, monitoring. And we just received confirmation that the approach initiation burn has been complete and is nominal. So again, Dragon making its way to about 400 meters directly beneath the International Space Station as integrated operations well underway between the NASA and SpaceX teams. So now with the approach initiation burn complete, the approach setup and maneuvering will continue on for the Dragon spacecraft. There'll be a go, no-go poll conducted by both the SpaceX and NASA teams that'll allow for the spacecraft to reach waypoint 0, the first of 3 checkpoints along the path to docking to that forward port of the Harmony module. Hearing communications inside of Mission Control that the teams continue to monitor the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station. And there now you can see on the left-hand side, joining us from Houston.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2 for rendezvous and docking.
In the station, go ahead on 2.
Approach initiation burn is complete. Dragon is 30 minutes to the 1,000 meters. Also, we wanted to let you know that docking, we're approximately 28 minutes early right now. And then when you have a chance, we'd like some help on the SSC and the cupola, SSC 11, if you could drop the apps so we can see the RPOP display.
Copy, I'll be there right away, and Zach and I are ready, and we are about to, sync and brief, and so, yeah. Copy, the 28 minutes ahead of the schedule.
Awesome, Sophie. And then one more thing, we unfortunately dropped the virtual ATU on the Teams call. So if there's any way to dial back in on your Teams, that'd be great.
Raphael, I'll give you status when we are in the cupola.
And there you just heard communications between the teams here at the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Capcom Alex Konolakos communicating with ESA astronaut, European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adno, who is joining NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway for approach and monitoring of the Dragon spacecraft this morning. And a little less now than 30 minutes away from the spacecraft reaching the 1,000 meter mark. And they gave an update on the time, which is even a little bit earlier than what we were tracking at the start of today's broadcast. Now 28 minutes earlier, which would put the approximate docking time to 5:32 a.m. Eastern time, or Central Time, 6:32 a.m. Eastern. So again, that communicated up to Sophie Adno, ESA astronaut on board the International Space Station from Mission Control here in Houston, that the Dragon spacecraft has again completed the approach initiation burn, less than 30 minutes away from reaching the 1,000 meter mark, and is ahead of schedule, about 28 minutes ahead of the original anticipated docking time. And again, looking at 5:32 a.m. Central, 6:32 a.m. Eastern. Now, next up for the Dragon spacecraft and its pursuit to the International Space Station will be reaching Waypoint 0, a sequence of checkpoints for the spacecraft to properly align itself, and for both teams here in Houston and in SpaceX in Hawthorne, California, to make sure that all systems are good before a further approach to the orbiting laboratory. Waypoint 0 currently on the clock for about 39 minutes from now, and this will allow Dragon to enter the first safety zone called the approach ellipsoid, and that'll be on a path to be safely outside of that zone for at least 24 hours if needed. If everything checks out, Dragon is cleared to move inside then the keep out sphere, another boundary around the International Space Station, a 200-meter safety bubble around the orbiting laboratory. And there you can see those two boundaries that outline around the orbiting laboratory. So again, Waypoint 0 coming up in about 39 minutes from now. This is Mission Control Houston as we continue to monitor NASA's SpaceX 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission heading towards the International Space Station as the approach initiation burn has been completed. As Dragon now making its way to about 400 meters directly beneath the International Space Station, and will continue its approach, looking to reach Waypoint 0 in about 37 minutes from now. If necessary, a mid-course burn, an approach initiation mid-course burn can be executed to again fine-tune the spacecraft's path to the orbiting laboratory. Docking time currently scheduled for 5:32 a.m. Central Time, 6:32 a.m. Eastern, as they recently just relayed communications up to the crew, NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway and ESA astronaut Sophie Adno, that the docking is approximately 28 minutes earlier than originally planned. So this will complete, upon docking, nearly a 37-hour journey for this Dragon cargo spacecraft, making its sixth flight. That journey for the Dragon spacecraft would begin Friday evening at 6:05 p.m. Eastern, 5:05 p.m. Central Time, upon liftoff from Space Launch Complex 40 in Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, as we take a look at some of the highlights from the launch day festivities. As Dragon and the Falcon 9 two-stage booster would clear the tower and make its way upward. And that's first stage booster also making its sixth flight into space. That would carry the cargo craft carrying 6,500 pounds of food and supplies to the Expedition 74 crew. Is about an 8.5-minute ride into its initial orbit. And a view from the first stage booster that would help carry this cargo craft to space for the sixth time. The first cargo Dragon spacecraft to fly for the sixth time. And again, great performance there from both stages, the first and second stage. First stage would return back to Earth at landing zone 40 at Space Launch Complex 40 in Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. The AI mid-course burn now, as the Dragon spacecraft has completed its approach initiation burn, the mid-course burn, in about 14 minutes from this moment, to continue to fine-tune the spacecraft's path to the International Space Station en route to what would be the first of three major checkpoints, waypoint 0. That'll be about 35 minutes from now. Now, I mentioned earlier that this cargo craft carrying 6,500 pounds of food, supplies, and science research. Let's take a closer look at some of the highlights of that research that Dragon is carrying today.
Sophie and 2 from Cupola, come check.
Sophie, got you loud and clear on 2 in the cupola.
Yes. You just mentioned earlier that needed some help for one SSC in the cupola. I'm in the cupola, ready to help.
And Sophie, we just need you to minimize that Optimus view and any other apps that may be up. We're hoping to see just the RPOP. And actually, one correction for you, Sophie. Can you please close that app?
Closing Optimus view on SSC 11.
And that is perfect, Sophie. Thanks for your help there. It's got a good view now.
And for now, we have, of course, no video for the DDM. And we have in the background the RPOP, so I think that's good.
Okay, yep, we're happy with the config for now, and we do see the timestamp, so everything is working as expected.
Great news.
communications there between the team here in Mission Control and the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Speaking with ESA astronaut Sophie Adno, who is joining NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway for approach and monitoring, doing a communications check from the cupola, as that is where they will be doing their monitoring from. And you heard them talking about configurations for software that they'll be using to monitor the rendezvous, proximity ops, and docking of the Dragon cargo spacecraft. So good to hear that all communications checking out as those two continuing.
And Sophie, we see that you've rejoined the Teams call. Thank you for that. Just a heads up that may occur again, so you can just keep an eye on it and rejoin if you need to.
Yeah, sure. I think at every KUL it's going to drop, so no worries. We'll reconnect every time we need it.
So good to hear there that the communications checkout's working well for ESA astronaut Sophie Adno and the teams here in Mission Control Houston, as Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno again preparing for the arrival of NASA's SpaceX 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission, now about 10 minutes away from the AI mid-course burn for the Dragon spacecraft to continue fine-tuning its route to the orbiting laboratory, and about half an hour, 31 minutes or so from now reaching waypoint 0. But as mentioned earlier, nearly 6,500 pounds of food and supplies, including research investigations, are on board Dragon today. Let's quickly take a look at some of the highlights of what Dragon is carrying to the Expedition 74 crew. The first research investigation is Odyssey, and Odyssey evaluates how well Earth-based microgravity simulators recreate space conditions. Researchers will examine bacterial behavior in space and compare the results to experiments conducted in microgravity simulators here on Earth. Another investigation that is making its way to the International Space Station is STORY. This instrument monitors charged particles in orbit around the Earth. These particles respond to space weather and can impact human assets on the ground, like power grids and satellites. STORY could help researchers gain knowledge to better predict and respond to these changes. Laplace is a research investigation that studies the movement and collision of dust particles in microgravity to understand particle motion in space and other atmospheres. Researchers hope to learn about Earth's origins and provide fundamental understanding of how planets in our solar system and beyond have come into existence. The Green Bone research investigation observes how bone cells grow and develop on a bone scaffold made from wood in space. Microgravity results could help researchers improve products that treat fragile bone conditions such as osteoporosis. And the last research investigation to highlight is SPARK. SPARK evaluates how well red blood cells and the spleen change in space. Researchers will observe human samples and imagery taken before, during, and after spaceflight to identify ways to protect astronaut health during long-duration space missions. Now, these are just some of the incredible research flying to the International Space Station today aboard the 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission between NASA and SpaceX. And you can find out more at nasa.gov/ISS-science. Now, also on board Dragon, in addition to this incredible research, is several bulk oval wrap bags, or BOBs as we call them, delivering a mix of standard and crew requested shelf stable and fresh food items to support crew health and morale on orbit. And there you can see members of the Expedition 74 crew: Sophie Adno in the top right, Jessica Meir in the middle, Jack Hathaway on the left, and Chris Williams on the bottom right, enjoying some of those fresh food items that arrived on a previous cargo flight to the International Space Station. Now, these items include standard and crew-requested items that are flying up on Dragon, and these include taco kits, chocolate, and cereals, along with fresh food such as apples, tomatoes, and baby carrots. So we continue to monitor along the approach of NASA's SpaceX 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission, now 7.5 minutes away from the AI mid-course burn. And in about 28 minutes from now, we will see Dragon's arrival to waypoint 0. A view of the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Diana Trujillo, Flight Director, and the Somos flight team closely monitoring both Dragon's approach and the International Space Station. And we will hear more and more calls and updates from the crew. Again, Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno will be positioned in the cupola to monitor the arrival and docking, which again, an earlier docking time in recent conversations with the crew just moments ago, tracking 28 minutes earlier than originally anticipated. 5:32 a.m. Central Time, 6:32 a.m. Eastern Time. At this hour, the International Space Station with the Dragon spacecraft catching up to it, flying 263 miles just to the east of South America, and will soon be crossing into Chile and Argentina before making its way into the South Atlantic Ocean. Now approaching 5 minutes and 20 seconds away from the AI mid-course burn, one of several burns that the Dragon spacecraft executed on its chase towards the International Space Station. 5 key burns highlight the journey for the spacecraft. The phase burn, which occurred about 45 minutes after liftoff, and that was performed at the first apogee, or the highest point of Dragon's initial orbit, and raised its perigee, or lowest point, to a higher altitude. Then followed up by the boost burn, close burn, transfer burn, and final co-elliptic burn that not only allowed Dragon to raise its altitude, but also pull closer to the International Space Station. They have already executed the approach initiation burn to continue its approach to the International Space Station. That was done at 4:08 a.m. Central Time, 5:08 a.m. Eastern. Now 4 minutes away from the approach initiation mid-course burn, as the Dragon spacecraft continues to maneuver itself closer and closer to the International Space Station. The Expedition 74 crew anxiously awaiting this arrival of 6,500 pounds of food, supplies, and cargo, and the research investigations that we just highlighted a moment ago. Sergei Kudzverchkov, the station commander of Roscosmos, along with NASA astronauts Chris Williams, Jessica Meir, and Jack Hathaway. Sergei Mikheyev and Andrei Fedyayev of Roscosmos also joining the Expedition at 74 crew, and Sophie Adno, who again is joining Jack Hathaway for monitoring Dragon's arrival. For Williams, Sergei Kudzverchkov, and Mikheyev, they would arrive to the International Space Station last November on Thanksgiving, November 27th, and have now crossed into their 171st day aboard the orbiting laboratory in their mission. And as for Jessica Meir, Jack Hathaway, Sophie Adno, and Andrei Fedyayev, they were members of NASA's SpaceX Crew 12 that launched back on February 13th aboard Dragon Freedom in its 5th flight. And for Hathaway and Adno monitoring, this is their first flight to microgravity and the International Space Station. For Hathaway, a member of NASA Group 21, a recent graduate, and for Sophie Adno, a part of the ESA astronaut group selected in 2022. We are now coming up on 2 minutes to the AI mid-course burn, And we'll continue to monitor as the International Space Station and the Dragon cargo spacecraft continuing its journey over the South Pacific Ocean, and again about to cross over onto the eastern coastline of Chile. And there you can see our very first views of the Dragon cargo spacecraft as seen from the International Space Station, which they are currently in an orbital nighttime. So all you can see of the Dragon spacecraft is that strobe blinking in the middle of your screen that helps illuminate its location, and for Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno to help monitor its location. And as it gets closer, we'll see more lights on the Dragon spacecraft. The navigation lights, red and green, also coming into view, but great to see the spacecraft, and again from an external camera, aboard the International Space Station. We are now 12 seconds away from the AI mid-course burn, and we'll stand by for monitoring. And receive confirmation that the mid-course burn is now underway. We are 44 seconds into the AI mid-course burn, approach initiation at mid-course burn, as Dragon continues to fine-tune its path towards the International Space Station. And upon completion of this burn, it'll be just on the outside of the approach ellipsoid, the first of two imaginary boundaries surrounding the International Space Station, the neighborhood of the International Space Station, a 4 kilometer by 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer oval around the orbiting laboratory.
Just one of you and Dragon.
Visiting vehicle officer here in Mission Control in Houston, confirming with the flight director, Deanna Trujillo, that the AI mid-course burn has been completed and went to plan, nominal. And now the team's preparing for the go, no go poll for waypoint 0 between the SpaceX teams in Hawthorne, California, and the teams here in Mission Control, Houston. And waypoint 0 is once the Dragon spacecraft arrives at the 400-meter mark below the International Space Station. And that will be, again, the first checkpoint during our approach this morning. Right now, the spacecraft about 1,170 meters away from the International Space Station, closing in at about 1.6 meters per second. And we'll hit that 1,000 meter mark in about a minute and 39 seconds from now. And again, there's the two teams working closely in integrated operations, which got underway just before the broadcast started this morning. That is the SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, California on your left, and the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston on the right-hand side. At this hour, the space station currently traveling at 270 miles above the Earth, statute miles, in which the team on the right-hand side closely monitoring as it flies in that incline of 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator, and currently crossing over Argentina and about to make its way into the South Atlantic Ocean. And there we can see the Dragon cargo spacecraft a little bit closer, and there you can see those navigation lights we were talking about earlier with the blinking strobe in the middle as the International Space Station currently in an orbital nighttime. And as we get clearer views, we will see that strobe in addition to the left and right.
Dragon range is approximately 1,000 meters. Monitor long-range approach per steps 1 to 4 in 1.102 Dragon approach and retreat monitoring.
1,000 meter, and we'll start monitoring with procedure 1.102, block 1.
That's a good copy, and we dropped the team, so if you can reconnect, that'd be great.
Well done.
And that was Capcom Alex Kanalakos relaying up to Sophie Adno and Jack Hathaway along with the Expedition 74 crew that the Dragon spacecraft is now less than 1,000 meters away from the International Space Station. Anticipated docking time 5:32 a.m. Central, 6:32 a.m. Eastern. They have completed the approach initiation burn and the approach initiation mid-course burn. In about 4 minutes from now, we will have the go, no-go poll for Dragon to make its way to waypoint 0. Now, waypoint 0 is the first of 3 checkpoints, if you will, on Dragon's final approach to docking to the International Space Station. Also, waypoint 1, which will be about 220 meters for the spacecraft in front of the docking port. And today, again, the spacecraft will be docking to the forward port of the International Space Station's Harmony module. And then waypoint 2 will be just 20 meters away, and that will allow...
Station Dragon 2, seeing a range of 862. Dragon is in sight with a good attitude.
Copy the visual.
And great to hear that. That was NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway relaying down to the ground that they have visuals on the spacecraft with good attitude. Approaching 3 minutes until the go pull for waypoint 0. And again, that'll be for the spacecraft to be about 400 meters under the International Space Station. And then from there, moving on to waypoint 1, which would move Dragon around in front of that forward port of the Harmony module at approximately 220 meters. And then waypoint 2 would be just 20 meters away for its final approach. And again, the targeting docking time a little ahead of schedule today. As they relayed to the crew earlier, about 28 minutes ahead of schedule, looking at 5:32 a.m. Central Time, 6:32 a.m. Eastern, delivering 6,500 pounds of cargo, science, and supplies. This is Mission Control Houston. Again, thank you again for following along this morning for the rendezvous and docking of NASA's SpaceX 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission to the International Space Station, as we have visuals on the Dragon cargo spacecraft. NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway and ESA astronaut Sophie Adno monitoring. They just relayed down moments ago that they have visuals themselves and are using special rendezvous and proximity operations and docking hardware and software aboard the International Space Station to monitor Dragon's arrival, approach, and docking. We are now coming up in less than a minute to the no-go poll for Dragon to approach waypoint 0. And communications inside Mission Control Houston just confirmed Diana Trujillo and the Somos flight team working diligently this morning, and they have given the go for approach to waypoint 0. So with that go, Dragon will continue its movement towards waypoint 0, which will be 400 meters below the International Space Station. It'll reach that mark in about 9 minutes and 38 seconds from now. Right now, it is currently 630 meters away from the International Space Station, closing in at a rate of 0.73 meters per second. And now as we get visuals of the Dragon spacecraft, you can see the clouds below it starting to illuminate as the International Space Station and the Dragon spacecraft entering an orbital daytime, and we'll start getting some excellent views of its approach. There you can see the strobe again illuminating the Dragon spacecraft, and a great shot there of the sunrise glinting off the side of the cargo craft, flying for its 6th time, the first time a Dragon cargo craft has flown to space 6 times. You also catch a small glimpse of the navigation light, the red light, the port side light, and that is what Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno monitoring today will use to help keep an eye on the orientation of the Dragon spacecraft as it continues to get closer and closer to the International Space Station. And now again closing in at 5,070 meters away and approaching waypoint 0, which will still be in about 8 minutes from now. International Space Station and Dragon now entering the South Atlantic Ocean before making its way to the northeast. The journey for the cargo spacecraft began Friday evening, 6:05 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:05 p.m. Central, with an on-time liftoff from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And upon docking today will be nearly a 37-hour journey for the spacecraft, carrying the 6,500 pounds of food supplies and research to the Expedition-74 crew. It'll be docked for about a month before returning to Earth. And again, a great view there from the International Space Station and the exterior cameras aboard as the teams here in Mission Control Houston quickly zeroing in on Dragon and its arrival. The nose cone hinged open. That occurred just moments after its initial orbit insertion shortly after launch. That nose cone held on by a sequence of hooks to expose the Draco thrusters, the bulkhead Draco thrusters, 4 of them, that allowed Dragon to execute a sequence of burns to not only climb up to a higher altitude, but close the gap in distance between it and the International Space Station. Waypoint 0 now coming into about 5.5 minutes from now. Dragon 495 meters away from the International Space Station and continuing to close the gap. We are now inside 4 minutes to the approach of waypoint 0, 400 meters directly below the International Space Station. And from waypoint 0, Dragon will move up and out in front.
Station. Dragon's altitude is as expected. Our range is now 475, and the nav light is as expected as well.
Copy all. Thanks for that, Block Bravo.
Communications there from ESA astronaut Sophie Adno, joining Jack Hathaway for monitoring this morning of Dragon's approach and docking, stating that attitude is as expected and gave the updated range of the cargo spacecraft to the International Space Station, now approaching 460 meters away. Still about 3 minutes and 45 seconds to reaching a waypoint 0. And again, once waypoint 0, which is inside the approach ellipsoid, has been reached, the teams on the ground will then monitor Dragon's maneuver to waypoint 1, which will swing the spacecraft in front of the forward Harmony port of the International Space Station, and there will sit at 220 meters, and then move in once all systems have been checked out and deemed go towards waypoint 2, which would be at 20 meters in front of that forward docking point port of the Harmony module. Dragon spacecraft continuing to close in on the International Space Station, now 446 meters away at a range rate of about 0.212 meters per second, and now 2 minutes away from reaching a waypoint 0. This is Mission Control Houston. Again, thank you for joining us this morning as the teams here in NASA's Johnson Space Center Mission Control and the International Space Station Flight Control Room, alongside teams at SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, California, monitoring the approach of NASA's SpaceX 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission. The Dragon cargo spacecraft now 1 minute away from reaching a waypoint 0. Dragon and the International Space Station currently orbiting above the Earth, 272 statute miles in the South Atlantic Ocean, and about to make its way just south of the South African coastline, and then will make its way northeast, and will just clip the southern coast of Madagascar before moving into the Indian Ocean. Now 5 seconds away from Dragon and its anticipated arrival at waypoint 0, and we just received confirmation right on time that the spacecraft is now 400 meters below the orbiting laboratory, now inside the approach ellipsoid. So with Dragon's arrival to waypoint 0, the teams in SpaceX and in Mission Control will pull a go, no-go for waypoint 1, and that will be in about 12 minutes from now. And we'll resume those views from the International Space Station as there's a communications handover as expected, but we'll keep an eye on Dragon's approach and arrival. And again, just reached waypoint 0, and we'll continue on. And a go, no-go poll for waypoint 1 coming up in about 11 minutes from now. And if all systems look good, Dragon will move into the keep-out sphere, the second boundary in the neighborhood of the International Space Station that has a radius of 200 meters. It'll be just on the outside. Waypoint 1 is about 220 meters in front of the forward port of the Harmony module, just on that boundary, edge of the boundary of the keep-out sphere. Again, the anticipated docking time for Dragon to the International Space Station today, 5:32 a.m. Central, 6:32 a.m. Eastern. Currently working about 28 minutes ahead of the original schedule. Spacecraft now 397 meters away from the orbiting laboratory. This is Mission Control Houston. As we continue to follow along the approach, rendezvous, and eventual docking of NASA's SpaceX 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission. And there you can see the Dragon spacecraft from an external camera view on board the International Space Station. We are 8 minutes and about 43 seconds away from a go, no-go poll for the spacecraft to begin its journey to waypoint 1. So to recap, the Dragon spacecraft has successfully completed the approach initiation burn, and that was earlier this morning at 4:08 a.m. Central Time. It also completed an approach initiation mid-course burn to continue to fine-tune its trajectory. NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway and ESA astronaut Sophie Adno, monitoring from the cupola, have visuals on the cargo spacecraft and continue its approach. It just passed through the approach ellipsoid, reaching waypoint 0 a couple of moments ago. And now teams on the ground again will conduct a go, no-go poll for waypoint 1. That'll be a little less than 8 minutes from this moment. Spacecraft at 370 meters away from the International Space Station is together. The cargo Dragon and the orbiting laboratory passing past now the eastern coast of South Africa and making its way to the southernmost coast of Madagascar, orbiting at an altitude of 268 statute miles above the Earth. Upon docking today, the spacecraft will complete a nearly 37-hour journey that began on Friday evening at 6:05 p.m. Eastern, 5:05 p.m. Central, carrying 6,500 pounds of food, supplies, and science to the orbiting laboratory. The Expedition 74 crew is currently working in the first half of their workday today. We mentioned that both Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno will be monitoring Dragon today. Chris Williams, alongside with his Roscosmos colleagues and Station Commander Sergei Kutsverchkov, Sergei Mikheyev, and Andrei Fedyayev, in the middle of their day as well. And Jessica Meir of NASA also helping with station duties here this morning. The Dragon spacecraft now 357 meters away from the International Space Station. And that go, no-go poll for waypoint 1 coming up in a little more than 5 minutes from now, as the teams here in Houston as well as in Hawthorne, California, and SpaceX continuing to make sure all systems looking good aboard the orbiting laboratory and aboard Dragon itself as they get ready for its docking, which again, a little bit earlier than the original timeline. 5:32 a.m. Central Time, 6:32 a.m. Eastern. This is Mission Control Houston as we continue to follow along with the approach of NASA's SpaceX 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission, and we'll get you those live views of the Dragon spacecraft from the International Space Station back shortly. This is a look inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room here in Houston, Texas, as NASA's Johnson Space Center is Gianna Trujillo and the Somos flight team actively working through all of the checkouts aboard the orbiting laboratory and closely monitoring today's approach. And here we see our first view from the Dragon cargo spacecraft looking up at the International Space Station, as the two together now flying just east of Madagascar and heading into the Indian Ocean. The Dragon now currently at 335 meters away from the orbiting laboratory, and we're still about a minute and a half away from the go, no-go pole for the spacecraft to move on to waypoint 1. At the top of the screen there of the International Space Station, top middle, if you will, a great view of the other Dragon that is currently on board the International Space Station. That is a part of NASA SpaceX's Crew 12, Dragon Freedom, that launched to the orbiting laboratory back in February 13th, carrying Crew 12 Commander and NASA astronaut Jessica Meir, pilot Jack Hathaway of NASA, ESA astronaut Sophie Adno, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev. As the sun glinting off the solar arrays on the right-hand side, you can also see some of the IROSAs, the rollout solar arrays, on display, as the cargo spacecraft again continuing its approach to the International Space Station, now passing 330 meters away. And coming up now on the go, no-go pole to continue on to waypoint 1, we will stand by. And again, a great view there from the International Space Station looking towards the Dragon cargo spacecraft, NASA SpaceX's 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission, as both teams have communicated and now 10 minutes away from the spacecraft to reach waypoint 1.
Station Houston on Space Ground 2. MCC is go for Dragon to approach to waypoint 2.
Station copies.
And great communication there is not only was the approval made for waypoint 1, but also the approval for Dragon to continue its approach to waypoint 2, which is 20 meters in front of the forward port of the Harmony module. So we are now about 8 minutes away from Dragon reaching the waypoint 1 mark, which is 220 meters in front of the forward port of Harmony and just on the outside of the keep out sphere. And then we just heard that communication from the ground to NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway monitoring today that the go has been given to continue on to waypoint 2, which will be 20 meters in front of that docking port. Right now, the Dragon spacecraft currently at 309 meters out from the orbiting laboratory, closing in at a rate of 0.14 meters per second. Dragon has now reached the 300-meter range mark from the International Space Station. In about 6.5 minutes, we'll reach waypoint 1, about 220 meters in front of the station's forward port of the Harmony module, which is where it will be docking today. And then the go has already been given to then head on to waypoint 2, 28 meters in front. Anticipated docking time today, approximately 5:32 a.m. Central Time, 6:32 a.m. Eastern. As we will continue to follow along with live coverage of NASA's SpaceX 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission that began Friday evening at 6:05 p.m. Eastern, 5:05 p.m. Central, with an on-time liftoff from Space Launch Complex 40 and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And it's carrying 6,500 pounds of supplies, cargo, and research to the orbiting laboratory. From there, it'll stay docked for about a month. The crew will snap into action once rendezvous and docking has been completed. The team will actively get to work and unloading those 6,500 pounds of cargo, food, and supplies. International Space Station, and with Dragon closing in, now orbiting 259 miles above the Indian Ocean, about to cross the Maldives and into India. Spacecraft now 281 meters away from the orbiting laboratory. And we'll reach waypoint 1, which will be 220 meters away, approximately 4.5 minutes from now. This is Mission Control Houston as we continue our live coverage of NASA's SpaceX 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission on approach this morning. Teams in Houston at NASA's Johnson Space Center and Mission Control in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, working in integrated operations with the team in Hawthorne, California, and the SpaceX Mission Control as the Dragon cargo spacecraft on approach to the International Space Station, now 260 meters away, with the anticipated docking time of 5:32 a.m. Central, 6:32 a.m. Eastern. So far, all systems have gone well and by the book for Dragon. They completed the approach initiation burn at 4:08 a.m. Central Time, a 90-second burn that would set up its approach to the orbiting laboratory. They would also execute a mid-course burn, AI mid-course burn, to help fine-tune its path. It would reach waypoint 0, given the go to do so, which was 400 meters below, directly below the International Space Station, and then given the go to reach waypoint 1, which had the spacecraft swing up and in front of the International Space Station, in front of the forward port of the Harmony module, which we will be docking today. And then moments ago, the go was given for Dragon to continue its approach and head towards waypoint 2, which will be 20 meters in front of the docking port. From there, we will keep an eye on soft capture and the soft capture ring for that initial contact, and then that'll be retracted. The hooks will drive.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2 for rendezvous and docking.
Houston Station, Jack and Sofa with you on 2 for rendezvous and docking.
Just wanted to give you a little status here. We're about 1.5 minutes from waypoint 1.
Happy 90 seconds from waypoint 1. We got a great view of it up here, and we are monitoring in step 2.
Great update there between the teams here in Mission Control Houston and NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway, who he and ESA astronaut Sophie Adno are monitoring today's approach and docking with great visuals. And we are now 40 seconds away from the Dragon spacecraft reaching waypoint 1. And again, that'll be 220 meters in front of the forward port of the Harmony module, the International Space Station. And now a great view of the International Space Station from Dragon, as you see the orbiting laboratory getting bigger and bigger, and you can slowly faint out that small dot. Oh, lost communication there just for a moment. We'll get that back as soon as we can. But again, view of Dragon from the orbiting laboratory, as Hathaway and Adno monitoring the orientation and the progress of the cargo Dragon. And we just received confirmation that Dragon has passed waypoint 1. So that is now closing in on 220 meters from the International Space Station and has already been given the go to proceed to waypoint 2. And with that go to approach waypoint 2, that arrival will be about that arrival for waypoint 2 will be about 10 minutes from now, and we are about 15 minutes away from docking of the Dragon spacecraft to the International Space Station. But before that docking, in about 8 minutes from now, we will have the go, no-go.
Station Houston on Space Ground 2. Dragon has passed waypoint 1, and we'd like you in step 3.
Copies. We're in step 3, and we also see approach to a line flight at circle mode.
And Jack, we may have clipped the last part of your message there. Didn't quite copy.
So he was just acknowledging your last message, and for the bug Bravo, so we see the range is 185, vehicle is in the corridor and centered, and attitude as expected.
Copy, Block Bravo.
Communications there between NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway and ESA astronaut Sophie Adno to the teams on the ground here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. And Alex Konolakos, the Capcom for today's rendezvous and docking. And you heard Sophie mention the range at 185, that is meters away from the International Space Station. In about 6.5 minutes, we will have the formal go, no-go poll for docking. And then about 2 minutes after that will be waypoint 2 arrival, which will put the spacecraft at 20 meters in front of the forward docking port. With the expected docking, if all checkouts proceed, in about 13 minutes from now. Currently at this hour, the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station crossing the northeast boundary of India, crossing over into Nepal, orbiting 258 miles above the Earth's surface.
In station in Block 3, we have reviewed steps 5 and 6, and we are ready for docking.
Copy. The procedure review is complete, and you are ready for docking. Station Houston, for rendezvous and docking at waypoint 2, Dragon will hold for approximately 5 minutes.
Station copies, we're expecting a 5 and a hold at waypoint 2.
Good copy.
And good insight there from the teams on the ground relaying to NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway monitoring today's Dragon approach that once Dragon reaches waypoint 2, they expect a hold. It'll hold its position at that point 20 meters in front of the Harmony module's forward port for approximately 5 minutes as the teams on the ground go through their checkouts before proceeding with final approach and docking. So again, that communication relayed to NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway monitoring today's Dragon approach that once the spacecraft reaches the second waypoint, waypoint 2, it'll execute a 5-minute hold, and we'll continue to monitor from here. We are about 3 minutes away from the formal go and no-go poll for docking for today's mission, NASA SpaceX's 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission. Waypoint 2 arrival will be in about 4.5 minutes from now. And again, there will be a 5-minute hold at waypoint 2. And you are seeing live views from the International Space Station looking at the Dragon cargo spacecraft as it continues its approach and reaching to waypoint 2 arrival with the nose cone swung open.
Thanks, Cindy. Oh, you got Hey, copy. As a reminder, we will be holding up.
Coming up now on 1 minute until the go, no-go poll for docking, as teams in Hawthorne, California and here in Mission Control Houston continuing to monitor the approach of the Dragon cargo spacecraft. Now well inside 100 meters and approximately 75 meters away from the International Space Station. There will be a hold at the waypoint 2 mark, which will be 20 meters in front of the forward docking port for about 5 minutes. That'll allow teams on the ground, both here in Houston and in Hawthorne, to monitor all communication systems and range systems to make sure that Dragon is good to go for approach. And there's a great view from Dragon looking at the International Space Station. There you can see that forward docking port front and center with the Crew 12 Dragon spacecraft just above it. That is Dragon Freedom that arrived to station after a launch on February 13th, carrying Jessica Meir, Jack Hathaway, Sofiadno, and Andrei Fedyaev. You can also see below the forward docking port NG-24, Northrop Grumman's cargo resupply services mission that occurred earlier in April. And a fantastic view of the International Space Station. You see the Kibo module to the right-hand side for JAXA, the Columbus module, ESA module to the left of the forward docking port as Dragon continues its approach, and again will hold at waypoint 2.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2 with the request to please close the cupola shutters.
I understand you want us to close all of them, or we leave one open for monitoring?
And sorry about that, Jack. You can keep the one you need for SA, and the others you can close.
That does work.
Coming up on 5 seconds until Dragon will reach waypoint 2, which will again be 20 meters in front of the forward docking port of the International Space Station, which you can see right there in the middle of your screen of the Harmony module. JAXA's Kibo module to the right side, ESA's Columbus module to the left. And we anticipate the Dragon cargo spacecraft, once reaching waypoint 2, to execute a 5-minute hold, which it has now made its way to that waypoint 2 mark. You can see that the motion has stopped And again, an anticipated 5-minute hold at this moment. Again, 20 meters away from that forward docking port of the International Space Station. And the teams on the ground have confirmed waypoint 2 arrival and the beginning of the 5-minute hold.
Houston Station, we got the vehicle mode of hold. We're expecting 5 minutes, and we're proceeding into step 4.
Houston copies.
As the 5-minute hold gets underway, the International Space Station and the Dragon cargo spacecraft now orbiting 260 miles above the Earth, just passing over the eastern border of Mongolia.
Station for the Block Bravo. The vehicle mode is hold. Primary range is stable, 20, and the vehicle is centered.
Houston copies. Good report.
ESA astronaut Sophie Adno reporting down that the vehicle is in its hold and at the proper distance, 20 meters, and is in good alignment. But again, a 5-minute hold is underway, a little more than a minute gone in that hold, and we'll continue to monitor. A little more than 2 minutes into the planned 5-minute hold for the Dragon cargo spacecraft, now just 20 meters away from the forward port of the International Space Station's Harmony module. We are 3 minutes and 40 seconds into the planned 5-minute hold for the Dragon cargo spacecraft at waypoint 2, 28 meters away from the International Space Station. Teams here on the ground in Mission Control Houston and in SpaceX in Hawthorne, California have just now pulled go for final approach and docking of NASA's SpaceX 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission, carrying 6,500 pounds of food, cargo, supplies, and science to the orbiting laboratory. We are now about 50 seconds away from the end of that 5-minute hold, and we'll continue to monitor the final leg of Dragon's journey to the orbiting laboratory. And you can start to see the shadows building up on the Dragon cargo spacecraft as it and the International Space Station now making its way into an orbital nighttime.
We see hold transition to approach to a line point. We were expecting to see approach to docking ports. Scratch that, we see the transition now. Vehicle modes now approach to docking port. We're in block 5.
Using copies.
Houston Station for the block Bravo. The vehicle mode is approach to docking port. Range is 18 meters and the vehicle is...
Using copies.
And with that, 18 meters and closing as the hold has completed and Dragon has continued its approach on its way to docking. We'll continue to stand by. Anticipated docking about 3.5 minutes from now. Dragon spacecraft now inside 15 meters from the International Space Station. And a great view there, the forward docking port on the right-hand side, and Dragon making that slow, methodical approach off the left. And there you can see some of the minor adjustments it's making to properly align itself with that forward docking port, as we are now 11 meters away, as all that separates the cargo spacecraft and the International Space Station.
In the station for block Bravo, the range is 10 meters and decreasing. The vehicle is centered, and the largest error observed is that less than half a degree.
Using copies.
Dragon now 8 meters away from the International Space Station, standing by. And again, you can see those minor adjustments and pushes forward for the Dragon cargo spacecraft to align with that forward docking port on the right side in front of the Harmony module of the International Space Station, now approaching inside 5 meters. Now,
Station, we reach 2 meters, crew hands off point.
Concur.
crew hands off point, standing by for contact.
Dragon contact and soft capture complete.
All right, we're moving to section 9 of the procedure for
Soft capture.
Contact and soft capture complete at 5:37 a.m. Central Time, 6:37 a.m. Eastern, as the International Space Station and the Dragon Cargo Resupply Services mission have come together over the Northwest Pacific Ocean. Again, capture confirmed and soft capture completed at 5:37 a.m. Central Time, 6:37 a.m. Eastern Time. NASA's SpaceX 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission has arrived to the International Space Station.
Ring retraction in progress.
And we just heard that the soft capture ring retraction is now in progress. That'll pull the Dragon cargo spacecraft closer to that forward port of the Harmony module, in which the hooks will clamp around to form the hard mate, and we'll monitor those two sets of 6 hooks that will form the tight seal between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station. And again, thank you for following along with us this morning as NASA's SpaceX's 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission has reached the International Space Station, with docking at 5:37 a.m. Central Time at 6:37 a.m. Eastern, as the International Space Station and the Cargo Dragon spacecraft were orbiting 260 miles above the Earth over the Northwest Pacific Ocean. And this will complete a some 37-hour journey for the Dragon spacecraft upon liftoff from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. That occurred on a Friday evening at 6:05 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:05 p.m. Central. And both Dragon and the International Space Station making its way into an orbital nighttime, so the daylight of the sun will fade off. There you can see the navigation light, the green navigation light, the starboard side of the Dragon cargo spacecraft that NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway and ESA astronaut Sophie Adno, who were monitoring the approach and docking today from the cupola, were using to help monitor the orientation. So again, the 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission between NASA and SpaceX has reached the International Space Station.
We see both Sensor 1, Sensor 2 upon docking complete are out, and we've started our 5-minute timer.
And we copy.
And that was NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway relaying down to the ground the docking procedures and setting the timer as the soft capture ring being retracted.
Station Houston, ring retraction is complete. Docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
Communication there as the ring retraction has been completed, the soft capture ring that is, and setting a pause is the teams configuring additional systems as the Dragon cargo spacecraft has successfully docked to the International Space Station. 5:37 a.m. was contact over the Northwest Pacific Ocean, 6:37 a.m. Eastern Time. This mission bringing 6,500 pounds of food, supplies, cargo, and research investigations to the Expedition 74 crew. Again, docking this morning at 5:37 a.m. Central, and we'll spend about 1 month docked to the International Space Station before returning to Earth.
Station Houston, MCS is configured, proceeding with hook driving.
Station.
And those commands relayed up to station from the teams here in Mission Control Houston that the hooks have begun traveling to form the hard mate between the Dragon cargo spacecraft and the International Space Station. Again, a total of 12 hooks, 2 sets of 6. The first set now traveling now, and we'll stand by and monitor as again the first set of hooks currently traveling, and we'll stand by. This is Mission Control Houston as we continue to monitor the progress of the docking procedures for the Dragon cargo spacecraft. Soft capture ring is retracted and the first set of hooks are currently driving to form the hard mate between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station, which made contact just a few moments ago at 5:37 a.m. Central Time, 6:37 a.m. Eastern. And we'll continue to follow along and monitor those hooks. Again, 12 hooks in total, 2 sets of 6. The first set currently traveling.
Station, that's 5 minutes past since undocking complete. Sensors 1 and 2 are off.
Houston copies.
Just received confirmation from the teams on the ground, both in Hawthorne, California, and here in Houston, that the first set of hooks have successfully closed, and the now second set of 6 are traveling. And again, all to form that hard mate between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station. view you are seeing is of Dragon from the International Space Station, but they are currently both together orbiting in a orbital nighttime as they are passing over the Pacific Ocean just past the northeastern portion of Hawaii, the Hawaiian Islands, some 260 miles above the Earth's surface, and standing by to monitor the second round of hooks closing for a hard capture of the Dragon cargo spacecraft to the International Space Station.
Station Houston, hard capture complete.
SpaceX 34, Cargo Dragon, arriving.
So you know when you're on board, it's always a special feeling to welcome a visiting vehicle. It's definitely a milestone over the course of the mission. First, early in the mission, you know it's scheduled, and you're like a kid before Christmas, patiently waiting for that day. Then you review your procedures, talk to the operational ground teams and instructors. And then you witness the successful launch, first round of applause. Then you see it for the first time in the darkness of space. You focus on the procedure, and when docking is complete, the bell rings. We would like to thank you, all of the teams on the ground, SpaceX, NASA, and all of the people working behind the scenes for this enabling such a beautiful docking. Now, let's go to work, because we have a ton of science to do. Let's go science. Let's explore.
Houston copies those great words, and congrats on the new arrival.
Some great words there from NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway and ESA astronaut Sophie Adno, formally welcoming NASA's SpaceX 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission to the International Space Station with the ringing of the bell. And as Sophie Adno mentioned, that the crew will quickly get to work and begin unpacking the Cargo Dragon spacecraft here in just a couple hours from now. Well, with that, it's been quite a journey since launch for this Commercial Resupply Services mission. It all began, the journey, on Friday evening at 6:05 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:05 p.m. Central, aboard a Falcon 9 rocket. This Cargo Dragon spacecraft, flying for the sixth time, would reach orbit and begin its chase to the International Space Station. And with a successful arrival and docking at 5:37 a.m. Central Time, 6:37 a.m. Eastern, this morning, Sunday, May 17th, 2026. For more information on this mission and all missions and the latest news on NASA and its agency updates, be sure to visit nasa.gov. With Dragon now safely aboard the International Space Station, that concludes today's rendezvous and docking coverage. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We hope you have a great rest of your Sunday. This is Mission Control Houston.